Hey there, Rye the Car Guy here, and today we're going to do a new upper control arm on the Titan. I went with a Moog upper control arm. If you want to use that exact part, go ahead and check out the description below where I put a link. I already lifted the Titan. I just used the front cross member, lifted it there, of course put two jack stands on either side, and then lowered it back down onto the jack stands. So let's get started by taking this tire off and removing that upper control arm. So of course, to get to our upper control arm, which is the control arm on the upper part of the suspension, we need to get room. So we need to take out the fender liner or the splash guard, whatever you call it. And there are it looks like six screws, just Phillips head screws. And it looks like there's 3 body panel clips, like those ones you have to pop off the top and pull out the plastic. Yours may vary. I don't know if anyone's been in here before. A lot of times these clips get lost, but remove all of those, and this whole inside splash guard should pull right out. So now we have nice clear access to our upper control arm. As you can see, my ball joint is completely destroyed, which is why we're doing this at all, really. This was actually gonna be a ball joint video, but I found how kind of rusted and sad my upper and lower control arms are, so we're just gonna do the whole thing. We have our 2 mounting points with our bushings in the rear and of course the ball joint up front. I'm gonna go ahead and release this ball joint first. So we just need to take out this little cotter pin here, back off the nut, and then we're gonna use probably a pickle fork to remove the ball joint. Before we do that though, we're going to grab a floor jack with a piece of wood to protect the bottom of the knuckle. Just, I mean, obviously your lower control arm and your shock and everything's gonna support the weight, but I just like to put that little extra piece of security in there. So this is just gonna make sure nothing is kind of sagging and putting any undue stress on all the other parts. Parts we're gonna replace anyways, but if you're not replacing them, you wanna make sure they're protected. So I'm just grabbing my needle nose pliers and straightening this little cotter pin here and then pulling it out. My upper control arm came with a new one, so I can just feel free to mangle this to get it out. So this is a 22 millimeter. So I'm gonna grab just my breaker bar here and take this off. Awesome. So once it's popped loose, it actually comes out nice and smooth. I'm gonna grab my pickle fork, slide it on here, and just pop this sucker off. If you're unfamiliar with a pickle fork, this is my preferred method of taking ball joints off, is just using this guy. They're pretty cheap. You can pick them up at Harbor Freight for just a couple bucks, or of course I can throw a link in the description below for you as well. So it just slides on here between the control arm and the knuckle, and this is another reason that we want to support the bottom of the knuckle, because we're going to be putting a lot of downward force on it. So this is clearly not the method to use if you are just removing your knuckle and trying to maintain your upper ball joint. Okay, so now that this is loose, you'll see that, of course, it's still mounted to the frame, which is good. On the left side, I'm going to start on the left side of the left side, and that is a 19 millimeter on the nut. And then the head of the bolt is actually 17 millimeters. So I'm just going to loosen these, just kind of break them loose. And you know, once they're loose, I'm going to fully remove the nuts and push the bolts out of both sides, so that way the whole control arm will come out. There we go. And then this side is gonna, well, we'll have to get creative on this side because you have your steering on one side and then you have your brakes on the other. So I'll figure out how to kind of make this work and I'll let you know what I do. These bolts are proving to be quite a chore, mostly because I can't get enough room to throw on like a breaker bar, because on this side we have our steering and our brakes. In fact, I just found a pretty substantial brake fluid leak from these little connectors here. So it looks like we have another video coming. But what I'm going to do is actually spray this off with PB Blaster. I'm just going to loosen everything up because I can only get some wrenches on here. So I need all the help I can get. So I'm going to get some blaster on there, and then I'll probably just revisit it either in a couple hours or in a couple days. We'll just see what happens. All right, we're back. Everything is soaked. And while I was away, I decided to go head to YouTube, kind of like you're doing now, and seeing how other people handle this, because I really don't want to use open face wrenches on these or anything like that to kind of strip them out or or do any damage. But when I went to go look online, for whatever reason, the videos I watched, this steering, the steering arm is not in the way. It's very odd, but it's sitting a lot closer to the engine. So I tried turning the wheel and doing a couple things, but generally that isn't going to move, right? That's just a joint that's connecting, of course, the steering box up to your steering column, and it just rotates in place. So I figured, hey, there's this little connector right here. Why don't we just pop this off, and this should theoretically swing out of the way and give us enough room. So that's only one bolt, and it should give us, again, more than enough space. So let's take that off, and that way we can get not only a breaker bar on this to take it off, but also a torque wrench to put it back on. That's just a 14 millimeter. So let's take that off. Excellent. And this should pop out. There we go. So we just have this little bolt here. It has well, it looks like a little flat edge there probably to hold everything in place. And then this should come out. There we go. We have now hopefully more than enough space. It might be tough with a torque wrench, but we can certainly get our breaker bar on here and loosen this. Now the only thing here is don't rotate this. Don't let this rotate, because this is, of course, your steering wheel, and then over here is your steering box, and you don't want to get those two out of alignment. So it's very easy to turn. As you can see, I'm spinning the whole steering wheel up in the cab. So just make sure that stays down there. And if you see that it's rotated, you might just have to do some realignment before you reassemble. So even with this removed, it's going to be a bit of a tight squeeze. Kind of have to push it on there. And I also have my 17 millimeter wrench on the other side, and it's just resting against the frame, or it's going to be when I start turning it. And that's, of course, just going to stop the whole bolt from rotating when I'm trying to remove the nut. So now that this is on here, we're going to break this loose and get it disconnected. There it goes. Now that I've used the breaker bar to get this thing loose, I can come in here with my regular wrench and just slide this out. This is going to take a month, but we'll get there. So after what feels like 250 revolutions, we have our nut off, and we can try to push it out. Unfortunately, I know we're going to hit the brakes here. Hopefully we can kind of push these out of the way. This is already leaking, like I said earlier, so I have to deal with it anyways, but just be gentle if you're going to move these around. They have some coils in it to increase the length, but you are going to have to push these out of the way a little bit. So just push it like that there. As you can see, the bolt is obstructed, so I'm going to just have to pull those brake lines forward and pull it out. You know, it just occurred to me that it'll probably be easier to take this bolt out when we remove the other bolt and the nut for the ball joint. So I'm going to do that, and then this should be able to kind of move out just a little bit, because there's going to be the slightest bit of play in these mounting holes. There we go. So as suspected, taking, of course, this bolt and that nut off gave us enough room to pull that other bolt out without much ado. So now that these are all loose, just pull straight out, and we have our upper control arm out. So I'm pretty sure that ball joint was toast. Obviously, using that pickle fork did a considerable amount of damage, but this was already pretty darn torn prior to me even starting the job. So that's one of the main reasons of doing this, of course. You could, if you wanted to, press out this ball joint and then just, of course, press in a new one and then reuse this existing arm. But that's not what we're going to do. So let's go get our new upper control arm and slap it back in. But before we run off and do that, I'm going to say what I always say, and if you watch my videos frequently, you know what's coming. But take this opportunity to clean stuff. So clean the inside of where your ball joint slides in, clean all your mounting locations. This is stuff that's going to be hard to access once everything is reconnected. Now, of course, my Titan is full of sand from the previous owner, so I'm going to take this time to kind of get some compressed air in here, blow some stuff out, get it all clean, and then we'll come back and install the new arm. All right, I just blew enough sand out of here to basically do a stage 1 weight reduction. There was just pounds and pounds of sand in here. I'm getting the feeling that I probably should have done that first before removing everything, but hey, at least my garage now feels like a beach. I'm just doing some final wiping down of the surfaces where the bushings are going to sit. So those mounting plates here, I of course cleaned out the spot where the top ball joint's gonna go in. And now we have our new upper control arm. So you're gonna wanna, of course, take the pin out of this and pull off this nut here. There is a little plastic protector on here. And you can leave this on if you want while you're doing the install if you think you're gonna knock it around here. But generally speaking, you're not gonna need to. It's gonna be, of course, held up by the bolts in the rear. So installing it, of course, is just the opposite of removal. But I'm going to put in the left bolt first. So I'm gonna go over here, kind of get this into place because it's gonna be the hardest one to slide in. Then once this is in all the way through, then I'm gonna go in and of course do the other one. So to get that bolt to feed in, I had to kind of cock this side up a little bit so you can see it's not seated in here. But now that I did that, I can realign it with its holes. There we go. And now that should slide through. Perfect. Just like that. Now it shouldn't be an issue if you want to throw a little bit of chassis grease in here. So that way if you do take these off in the future, if you had seized bolts, I know a lot of you guys deal with that, but if you had some seized bolts, you could throw just a little bit of chassis grease in here to see if kind of keep that freed up. So we just got to feed this other one back in. There we go. Excellent. And then get our nuts back on there. Now an important thing to note here, we want to leave this loose for now. And we want to do that because you cannot tighten these down. Well, you could, but you don't want to tighten these down when it's in its lowest position, or of course if it's really high. You want to reinstall the ball joint first, and you actually want to lift the suspension components with the jack. And so what it's going to do is put it in its normal ride height, and that's where you want to tighten those rear bolts. That's called preloading your bushings. And we're doing that because we want the bushings to be in their neutral position when the car is just sitting on the ground, or in this case, the truck, of course. If you tighten it right now and you tighten it at its lowest point and the car is just sitting, that means that the bushings are constantly under tension. And what that's going to do is, at a minimum, it's going to cause some squeaking and make some obnoxious noises when you're going up and down. And at the worst, you're going to basically wear them out a ton faster or tear them if you're going over some large bumps and you're over torquing them. So to do that, we just grab our steering knuckle and we guide this back in here. There we go. And I'm also going to put just the slightest bit of chassis grease on the top here as well, where this rubber protector meets that steel, mostly because it's just going to be rotating against that rubber piece, and I don't want it to get twisted or torn or anything like that. And then we realign this. Awesome. And slide on our new nut. Now this is actually where I'm going to leave you with this video. Here are your torque specs for all of the bolts that need to go back in. All we do at this point is literally just that. You tighten those bolts down to those particular specs. Make sure you put your split pin in back into your ball joint, and that's literally it. Put your tire back down, drop it, and you are done. The only thing that might give you a little bit of trouble is this guy here, and you just want to make sure that this is slid as far forward as possible, because you'll see this little tip here, you'll see we'll have to slide in a little bit further up, so up where this little cut is in this bracket, and then just slide your bolt in and of course torque it down to the proper spec. For me, the reason I'm not completing this job this moment is that I'm actually going to go shoot another video for the coilover. We're going to swap out that, and we're going to swap out the lower control arm, so that's going to be a third video. So I'm going to go do that. But that is going to end it for this video. If you do have any questions or comments, of course, go ahead and put them down in the comments below. I really appreciate you watching this. If you feel like this helped you, please help me out by clicking like and subscribing to the channel. And I'll see you in the next one.